Poetry time! Roses are red, storm clouds are grey.
There's no war in Ba Sing Se.
So, after we talked about the somewhat controversial episode last time, let's talk about something more positive. Poetry Scam. This is the first episode that features Hansel in the major role. He did appear before, but more as a side character, though they already established at this point that Dolly has a crush on him. Hansel is a husky, and for some reason people keep telling me that he looks like Steel from that Balto movie. And yeah, they are both huskies and have blue eyes, and that's kinda where the similarities stop. Next they're telling me Dolly looks like Catbig, cause they are both Dalmatians with floppy ears. Now the episode opens with Dylan reciting a poem to Dolly, who ignores him as she is staring at Hansel being very cute. Dylan tells her she should just go and talk to him, which results in Dolly having a very adorable meltdown trying to figure out what she should say. And we establish that Diesel is wearing a cone that picks up voices. Somehow. Yeah, no idea how that is supposed to work, but it's a cartoon, so let's roll with that. I just like how Dylan is just kinda annoyed in that scene, indicating that he's getting tired of Dolly talking about Hansel all the time, but not being confident enough to actually approach him. Surprisingly enough, Dylan shows in the episode crushed out that he doesn't really have that problem and is actually pretty confident in himself. In any case, Dolly finally brings up the courage to approach Hansel and she immediately faceplants and is at a loss for words. You know, usually I consider scenes like this rather cringe-worthy, but in this case, it actually works for me, and I just think it's really adorable. Dolly ends up reciting Dylan's poem, which impresses Hansel as it speaks to his inner wolf. And they agree to meet again for a date to talk more about poetry. Dolly is obviously very happy about that, but then she gets nervous. Back at home, she tries to come up with a poem herself, which ends up being more of a silly rap. Well, her siblings really love it though. Speaking of which, I think I haven't really talked about those yet. Out of the 99 puppies, only a few have a unique design and personality. Every other puppy basically looks the same, only with different spots, and more often than not they act like a hive mind. Also, there seems to be more than 99 at times. That is of course only understandable, since designing 99 different characters is quite a task, and it's just better for comedic effect to just drop a small army into every scene without counting each individually. They can still give them a unique design and personality when they want to introduce another puppy to the main cast eventually, but until then they are basically just placeholders. This is not bad. Sure, it would be awesome if each of them had a distinguishable appearance from the get-go, but I think that's covered by the willing suspension of disbelief. And I want to point out that they are actually rather adorable. Especially in this episode, when they cheer for Dolly and sing along to her rap, you just want to hug all of them. Anyway, Dylan joins the party and comments that Dolly is acting weird. Dolly explains how she took his poem and how Hansel connected to it. After some talk, Dylan agrees to help Dolly with her date by giving her poems on the spot so she can keep pretending that she is a poet and impress Hansel this way. What I really like about this episode is that Dolly is very open to Dylan about it. She doesn't just steal his poems, nor does she trick him or forces him to help her. Dylan himself is just amazed that someone likes his poems and he just wants people to hear them, as he is too shy to do it himself. Sure, it is a rather selfish proposition by Dolly, but it's just amazing to see how happy it makes Dylan, even when Dee Dee immediately points out that it is wrong. It would have been very easy for this episode to have Dolly just claiming Dylan's poems for her own behind his back or force him to help her. I just appreciate the fact that Dolly only got the idea when she notices that Dylan would be willing to help her out. Now they give Dolly's Diesel's cone, after it got a small makeover from Da Vinci, who got her first lines in this episode, I think. I hope we get an episode about her soon, cause I just love her design. With it, Dylan can whisper his poems to Dolly from a safe distance without Hansel noticing. I also think it is pretty interesting how the cone is treated like it is nothing extraordinary. Usually when you see a cartoon dog with one of these, it is treated like something annoying or embarrassing. Dolly is not exactly thrilled to wear it, but she is not particularly bothered by it either, and is even willing to wear it on a date with her crush, Hansel, who also doesn't really mind it. I mean, let's compare that with the 90s cartoon.
Hey look, how's it going?
Looking good!
Yeah, I didn't even notice your giant nerdy plastic cone. Ow! What?
Okay, I know I look like a dork. You guys don't have to cover.
So what I'm basically saying is that 101 Dalmatian Street is in fact better at subverting expectations than Game of Thrones. I wish I was joking, but season 8 was just bad. Now Dolly goes to a date with Hansel, and besides some hiccups as Dylan gets distracted by Diesel, which results in Dolly repeating some embarrassing lies, it goes pretty well, and Hansel suggests that Dolly should perform at the next poetry slam. She agrees and even gets a thumbs up from Dylan. After that, however, Dylan and Dolly are slightly at odds with each other, as Dolly doesn't want all of her siblings to tag along to the poetry slam, and Dolly gets a bit arrogant.
And besides, they wouldn't get my poem.
You mean my poem?
Right. Your words with my one-of-a-kind flair.
Uh-huh.
However, it is not quite as bad as it seems, as Dolly is very conflicted. She wants to impress Hansel, but she's obviously not liking what she is doing. But more importantly, I think it is rather interesting that the conflict is not even about Dolly stealing Dylan's credit, but rather that Dolly wants to exclude her family. Now, admittedly, I can somewhat understand Dolly here. This is a great chance to impress Hansel for good, and having her entire family there is just kinda awkward. I mean, just saying, I really don't like flirting with people when a close friend or family is nearby. It feels twice as embarrassing to me when it doesn't work out. Besides that, I think another thing to consider is that Dolly takes her responsibility as a role model more serious than people give her credit for. This is especially true in the episode My Fair Dolly, when she dropped her act, when she notices that her siblings started to imitate her, and I think it is similar here. Dolly knows that what she is doing is wrong and doesn't really want her younger siblings to see her lying like that, or worse, imitate her. Now Dylan seems to respect Dolly's wish in the end, but when his siblings say that they want to go, he gives in but says that they need to be inconspicuous.
Will be inconspicuous.
Yeah, that. Have I mentioned that these puppies are adorable? In any case, what really sells this episode to me is that Dolly is conflicted the entire time, and when it is her turn to perform, she drops the act and tells everyone the truth immediately. I like that there was no other reason for her to do that than her consciousness. We don't get the standard liar reveal trope or anything like that. Instead, she gets her brother on stage and tells him to overcome his stage fright, which is in itself a very sweet moment, and this is rewarded by a lot of cheers. And to close things off, Dolly reprises her small rap. And yeah, I have to say, it is somewhat catchy. I really like the visuals that go with it. It doesn't try to be cool, it's just a bit goofy and shows the entire audience who Dolly really is. Not trying to pass herself off as a poet anymore, and that's why I think it works, unlike 90% of all other cartoon raps. She certainly beats that rapping dog from that one Titanic movie. You know which one I'm talking about. Well, and then this episode ends with this.
Hop, hip-hop is all very well for puppies, but it's just so mainstream. Now, Dylan, talk to me about dots, spots, cloud metaphors.
Oh, it would be my pleasure. You see, originally I was going to use wet noses.
Oh, genius.
In case you ship Dylan with Hansel now, I don't blame you. Actually, I'm more in favor of that ship than having Dolly hook up with him, and I guess this is a good point to wrap things up. I actually asked around which episode I should review next, and this one came out on top. And it's easy to see why. It is simply a very good episode, and while the last review was about Dolly at her worst, this episode could be considered Dolly at her best. You get a good impression of her quirks in this episode, it highlights some of her flaws, but also her strengths. She might be a bit self-centered, but in the end the most important thing for her is always her family. And while she tries to take advantage of Dylan here at first, she also shows that she is very supportive of her brother and helps him to overcome his insecurities. Besides that, this episode manages to actually avoid some annoying cliches and even manages to subvert some. So yeah, I wouldn't consider it one of the funniest episodes, but arguably one of the best written ones. But what about you? Did you like this episode? Anything that bothered you? Do you ship Hansel with Dylan or Dolly? Let me know in the comments below. I am Tricky Fox. Stay foxy.
Everybody's feeling fine 'cause it's party